When you stand at the base of a massive skyscraper or like you look up at the cables of a towering suspension bridge, the overwhelming impression you get is just one of absolute uncompromising rigidity.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's all steel and concrete.
Right. It's completely unyielding. And you naturally assume that if a structure like that bends, well, it breaks.
It's a very intuitive assumption.
Mhm.
But if you were to actually sit down with the structural engineers who design those megastructures, they would tell you the exact opposite.
Really?
Oh, yeah. If that suspension bridge didn't have the engineered capacity to sway in heavy winds,
Hmm.
or if that skyscraper couldn't literally flex and wobble during an earthquake, the entire thing would just shatter under the pressure.
Wow.
Yeah, the rigidity is an illusion.
So the flexibility is actually what makes the rigidity functional in the real world.
Exactly.
And that paradox, the idea that a seemingly absolute monumental structure must contain deliberate engineered flexibility just to survive the passage of time, is exactly what we are looking at today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are jumping into a profoundly influential historical and theological text. Specifically, we're unpacking excerpts from a renowned sermon by Imam Ali.
Yeah, and for some quick context before we dive right into the text itself, Imam Ali is, well, he's a towering historical and theological figure from the 7th century.
Right.
Whether you are looking at Islamic history, philosophy, or literature, his speeches and letters are studied as absolute masterclasses in rhetoric, governance, and jurisprudence.
And just a quick tone check for you listening. Our mission today isn't to look at this from a confessional standpoint. We are here to impartially examine how this specific text constructs a complete, functioning system for human behavior.
Yeah, regardless of whether your background is in ancient legal systems theology or, if you're just fascinated by how language can inspire millions of people to move across the earth, this text is a masterclass.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way this text goes about building that system is, it's fascinating. It splits the human experience into two very distinct, almost contradictory halves.
It really does.
First, we are going to explore the intensely intricate intellectual and legal architecture of the Qur'an as described in the sermon. We can think of that as the mind.
The analytical side, right?
Exactly. And then the text takes a sharp turn, pivoting entirely to the visceral, physical, and emotional embodiment of faith through the Hajj pilgrimage. And that is the body.
It's a brilliant structural choice.
Yeah.
It is trying to harmonize the cold, analytical capacity of the human mind with the deeply instinctual spiritual drives of the physical body.
Let's start with the mind then, because the first half of this text is dedicated entirely to categorizing the book, the Qur'an, and its legal ordinances. And it absolutely does not describe it as a simple list of do's and don'ts.
No, not at all.
It describes the text through this overwhelming cascading series of contrasting pairs. Like it mentions the lawful and the unlawful, the obligations and the excellences, the abrogating and the abrogated, dispensations and strict duties.
It's relentless, honestly.
It just keeps going. Specific and general admonitions and parables.
Yeah, the unqualified and the qualified, the decisive and the ambiguous, and finally, the concise statements versus the obscurities.
It's a lot.
It is. What we are looking at is a highly analytical breakdown of a legal and spiritual framework. It's establishing boundaries and categories for every conceivable human action.
When I was reading that list of contrasting pairs, my brain immediately went to computer science.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it felt like I was looking at the source code of a massive operating system, or maybe like peeling back the intricate layers of a nation's foundational constitution.
Right, yeah.
It's clearly not a flat document that you just read from top to bottom. It's an interactive framework. Some of this is strictly executable, what the text calls the decisive parts or the strict duties.
The stuff you just have to do.
Exactly. That's the strict stuff. But then right alongside it, you have code that is deliberately left open-ended for human interpretation. The ambiguous parts, the dispensations, the parables.
I like that analogy. And taking that source code analogy a step further, what's fascinating here is how the text explicitly acknowledges that not every line of code is meant to be perfectly understood by the end user.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Within this massive, intimidating architecture of contrasting pairs, the sermon notes that there is knowledge bound by a covenant, meaning things you are strictly required to know and uphold.
Okay, that makes sense for a religious text.
Right. But right next to it, it states there is knowledge in which, quote, ignorance is permitted for the servants.
Ignorance is permitted.
Yeah.
I have to pause there because that is such a striking, almost jarring phrase to find in a deeply legal context. Usually the baseline assumption is that the law demands total comprehension.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse, right?
Exactly. We are taught you have to know the rules of the game to play it.
But think about the psychological weight of a system that demands total, uncompromising comprehension from every single individual.
It would be exhausting.
It would be impossible. If a legal or spiritual framework required you to deeply grasp every nuance of theology, every historical context, and every complex legal derivation just to be a participant, it would become unbearable.
It becomes that brittle skyscraper we talked about earlier.
Exactly, the one that just shatters in the wind. By explicitly stating that ignorance is permitted for certain things, this framework is doing something very sophisticated.
It's building in flexibility.
Yes. It is building a psychological failsafe into the system. It is a direct, compassionate acknowledgement of human cognitive limits.
That feels incredibly relevant to modern life, actually.
Oh, definitely.
We live in an era of information overload where there is this underlying anxiety that we need to have an informed opinion on every geopolitical event, understand every scientific breakthrough, optimize every habit.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. And this text from centuries ago is essentially saying, look, you don't need to understand the subatomic physics of the universe to know how to walk down the street.
Right. You don't need to grasp the most obscure, ambiguous theological concepts to fulfill your basic daily obligations.
It's an antidote to intellectual paralysis.
That's a great way to put it. The covenant binds you to what you fundamentally must know to function ethically, but the permission of ignorance frees you from the crushing anxiety of what you cannot possibly know.
It's beautifully realistic.
It is.
And that realism really shines when the text moves from the static architectural blueprint into how the law actually operates in the messy reality of daily life. It details this complex interplay between the book, the primary text, and the sunnah.
And just to clarify for those who might not be familiar with the term, the sunnah essentially refers to the recorded traditions, sayings, and lived examples of the prophet.
The secondary layer.
Right. It acts as the secondary living layer of the legal system alongside the Qur'an.
Okay, and this is where I need to wave a flag and express some genuine confusion.
Uh-oh. Lay on me.
Because the mechanics here sound dizzying. The text describes how an obligation might be fixed in the book, but its abrogation, which is basically its cancellation or modification, is found in the sunnah.
Yes.
Or, conversely, something might be explicitly obligatory in the sunnah, but its abandonment is allowed in the book. Wait, hold on. Isn't that confusing or contradictory?
I can see why you'd say that.
I mean, how does someone navigate a system where something is required in one text but allowed to be abandoned in another? If a rule is etched into the ultimate foundational text, how on earth can a secondary tradition just modify or cancel it out? That sounds like a massive loophole.
It looks like a contradiction on the surface, sure. But if we pull back and look at the mechanics of historical jurisprudence, it's actually a brilliant mechanism for dealing with the passage of time.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think of the book as the anchor. It's the fundamental constitution setting the eternal trajectory. However, human life is intensely contextual.
Right.
A community facing the existential threat of war needs different immediate rules than a community living in peaceful prosperity.
So the law needs a mechanism to change its mind without breaking its foundation.
Precisely. Let's look at that concept of abrogation, the idea that an earlier ruling is superseded by a later one.
Okay.
Imagine an early rule that was implemented when a community was incredibly fragile, perhaps a strict mandate on how resources are shared.
Like wartime rationing.
Exactly. Now, once the community stabilizes and the economy flourishes years later, that strict rationing is no longer necessary. The sunnah, the living tradition, provides the context that abrogates or phases out that specific early mandate in favor of a general principle found in the book.
Oh, I see.
It's a highly sophisticated method of applying a static truth to a dynamic timeline.
Okay. So the tension between the primary text and the living tradition isn't a flaw. It's the engine of adaptation. It's the swaying of the skyscraper.
You've got it. And the sermon goes even further to show how this law scales on an individual level.
Right. It mentions time-bound obligations.
Yes, things that are required at a specific moment in your life, but cease later on. It also distinguishes between the severity of actions. It notes there are major prohibitions for which there is a threat of fires, and minor ones for which forgiveness has been set aside.
It's basically a system of moral triage.
Triage is the perfect word for it.
It's recognizing that not all mistakes are equal, which, again, lowers the anxiety of participating in the system. But, the concept that really stuck with me in this section is the distinction it makes between that which is accepted in its minimal form versus that which is granted expansiveness in its maximum.
It's a profoundly empathetic piece of legal theory.
It really is. It reminds me of the modern conversation around habit formation.
Like James Clear and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Atomic habits.
Yeah.
The advice is always, if you want to get in shape, don't commit to a 2-hour workout. Just commit to doing one single push-up.
Lower the barrier to entry.
Right. The system accepts the minimal form. If all you can offer is the bare minimum due to your health, your wealth, or your intellectual capacity, the structure holds you. You are compliant.
But if you have the capacity,
Yes. If you have the energy, the means, and the desire to go further, the system grants you an infinite ceiling. The ceiling is limitless, but the floor is incredibly accessible.
it's the ultimate inclusive design. Think about it. A society contains brilliant scholars and struggling laborers, the wealthy and the destitute.
Right, a huge spectrum.
A rigid law would break the laborer while boring the scholar. This framework stretches to challenge the one with capacity, but shrinks to accommodate the one struggling, all without losing its structural integrity.
That makes total sense. So up to this point, we have been exploring this incredibly dense, highly intellectual, perfectly scaled legal system. We've been living entirely in the realm of the mind.
Very cerebral.
But then the text makes a sweeping, dramatic pivot. It transitions away from all this heavy categorization of the law, and it drops us right into the visceral, physical, and emotional manifestation of devotion. It moves to the Hajj, the physical pilgrimage to the sacred house.
Notice how the entire vocabulary of the sermon shifts here, too.
Yeah, it really changes.
We completely leave behind the dry, legalistic terminology of abrogations, dispensations, and strict duties. Suddenly, we enter a world of primal, almost earthy imagery.
Right.
The text states that the pilgrimage was made obligatory, acting as a direction of prayer. But then it uses two incredibly vivid animal metaphors to describe the masses of people moving toward it.
Yes, it says, quote, "They come to it as cattle come to water, and they yearn towards it as doves yearn."
Such a shift.
Let's pause and really look at those metaphors, because to go from constitutional architecture to thirsty cows and hummingbirds is a radical tonal whiplash.
It is jarring. What do those specific images evoke for you when you place them in the context of a religious mandate?
I have to admit, when I first read Cattle Coming to Water, I chuckled a bit because it's so unglamorous.
It really isn't.
It implies something desperate and biological. Like, if you picture a herd of cattle in a dry, scorching landscape, and they catch the scent of water, they don't form a polite line and stroll.
No, they stampede.
Exactly. It's a thirst tied entirely to basic survival. It's an unavoidable primal urge. I guess it's like waking up in the morning and stumbling blindly to the coffee machine.
Right.
You aren't overthinking the legal requirement of making coffee. Your body just demands it.
That's a brilliant way to frame it. It completely bypasses the intellect.
But then right next to the cattle, you have this image of doves yearning, and that operates on a totally different frequency.
It does. Doves evoke a homing instinct.
Right. It feels elevated, almost romantic, a peaceful, deep-seated longing to return to a place of origin. Placing the desperate thirst of the cattle next to the romantic yearning of the dove is a fascinating juxtaposition.
It is, and it raises a vital question about how this text views the very concept of religious submission.
How so?
Well, the sermon explicitly notes that the pilgrimage is a sign of their humbleness before his greatness and their submission to his might. Now, historically, when we hear phrases like submission to might, our minds jump to something coercive.
Yeah, we imagine subjugation, a defeated army bowing to an emperor under the threat of violence.
Absolutely. It sounds very top-down. The law says go, so you pack your bags out of fear of punishment.
Right, pure compliance.
But by injecting these specific animal metaphors of cattle and doves, the text fundamentally re-engineers what submission means in this context. It is not portraying submission as a forced subjugation against human will.
Oh, wow.
It is reframing it as a fundamental, life-sustaining instinct. You don't have to threaten cattle with a legal penalty to make them drink water. Their own biology drives them to it.
Yeah, they just go.
And you don't have to force a dove to fly home. The text suggests that the human soul possesses a parallel intrinsic drive toward the divine.
So the obligation of the pilgrimage, this massive physical undertaking, isn't framed as a heavy chore imposed from the outside.
No, not at all.
It's framed as the fulfillment of an internal natural drive. The legal text might be what officially says go, but the soul was already thirsty.
Exactly. The intellectual mind is given the complex, rigid structure of the law to keep society functioning, but the physical body is driven by this undeniable instinctual pull. It's a deeply holistic view of human nature.
And what happens when these millions of thirsty, yearning people actually arrive? The text transitions from the journey itself to the profound transformation that occurs at the destination.
The sanctuary itself.
Right. It describes the people who answer this call as having attentive ears, standing at the stations of the prophets. And then there's the soaring mystical image where it says the pilgrims resemble his angels encircling his throne.
It's a breathtaking moment of macro and micro mirroring each other. The physical, dusty movement of human beings walking in circles around the sacred house on earth is framed as a direct reflection of a cosmic, metaphysical reality, angels encircling a divine throne. For a brief moment, the text collapses the distance between the mundane human realm and the celestial realm.
But just as you get swept up in that highly mystical, angelic imagery, the text grounds you again with a really fascinating choice of words.
The commerce part.
Yes. It says that by undertaking this journey, the pilgrims are earning profits in the commerce of his worship. I really want to pull on this thread. Why inject an economic metaphor, earning profits, engaging in commerce, into the absolute climax of this deeply spiritual act?
That intersection of the material and the divine is crucial to understanding the gritty reality of what the text is discussing.
Gritty.
Yeah, we have to remember what a pilgrimage meant in the ancient world. The Hajj was not an abstract, quiet meditation in your living room. It required literal, heavy commerce.
Right, it wasn't cheap.
Not at all. You had to spend your life savings, secure provisions, leave your business and family behind for months, and endure the brutal physical toll of crossing deserts where disease and bandits were real threats. It was a massive material investment.
You are literally spending your physical and financial resources. It is a grueling transaction. It's sweaty, it's dusty, it's exhausting.
Yes, but the text flips the nature of the return on that investment. The input is entirely material, money, sweat, time, physical endurance.
Right.
But the profit earned in this commerce is entirely metaphysical. The text says they are hastening to the appointed time of his forgiveness. The commerce of worship takes the physical currency of intense human effort and converts it into the spiritual currency of forgiveness and angelic resemblance.
It's the ultimate exchange rate.
Exactly.
And the text brilliantly anchors this massive spiritual undertaking back in physical reality when it outlines who this obligation is actually for.
Yes, this is a key point.
It declares the sacred house is a banner for Islam and a sanctuary for those who seek refuge. But it specifically quotes the decree that the duty is for mankind, for him who is able to find a way there.
For him who is able to find a way. That phrase brings us full circle.
Oh, so.
If we connect this back to our discussion in the first segment, this is the ultimate embodiment of that legal concept. We explored the distinction between the minimal accepted form and expansiveness in the maximum.
Oh, it scales. The law scales again.
It has to scale. The instinct might be universal. Every soul might have the thirst of the cattle and the yearning of the dove, but the grim physical reality of human limitation is still respected by the legal framework.
So it doesn't demand the impossible.
Exactly. It demands this arduous journey only from the one who has the financial capacity, the physical health, and the secure means to actually navigate the path. It's a sweeping, monumental obligation, but it is firmly gated by profound realism.
And it closes that entire section with a rather stark reminder of independence. It says, "And whoever disbelieves, then indeed God is self-sufficient above all worlds."
Right.
Meaning, the system doesn't need you. You need the system, to use our earlier metaphor. The water doesn't need the cattle to drink it. The cattle need the water to survive.
That summarizes the dynamic perfectly. The architecture of the law and the sanctuary of the sacred house stand regardless of human participation. They are fundamentally self-sufficient.
Right.
The human being is the one in desperate need of the structure to guide the analytical mind, and the sanctuary to quench the primal instinct of the body.
This has been an incredibly rich journey, just unpacking these few excerpts from Imam Ali's sermon.
Really has.
We started in this intensely cerebral, almost intimidating web of legal rulings. We examined the dualities, the lawful and unlawful, the decisive and ambiguous.
Source code.
The source code, yeah. We saw how a legal system survives not through absolute rigidity, but by building in fail-safes, by explicitly permitting ignorance to prevent cognitive burnout, and by allowing the dynamic tradition of the Sunnah to continually adapt the foundational rules of the book to changing contexts.
We saw a roadmap uniquely designed to challenge the intellect without breaking it.
Exactly. But then we saw how that same text addresses the physical body. It takes this highly regulated, rational, legal subject and transforms them into a yearning dove, a thirsty animal migrating toward a sanctuary.
It's quite a transformation.
It is. It takes the exhausting, expensive, very earthly reality of ancient travel and turns it into the ultimate profitable commerce of worship, where flawed human beings temporarily mimic the orbits of angels. It really is a masterful, holistic framework that accounts for both the mind and the body.
It leaves no part of the human experience unaddressed. It provides the rigid structural boundaries needed for a functioning society to survive, alongside the boundless instinctual spiritual horizon needed for the individual soul to thrive.
Which leaves me with a final thought to mull over, something that isn't directly in the text but is provoked by everything we've just discussed.
Let's hear it.
So we've seen how this text provides such a highly structured, individualized legal code for the mind to navigate the complexities of daily life.
What?
Yet it also demands this instinctual, highly synchronized physical journey for the body, where you travel to a specific place and move exactly as millions of others move, essentially dissolving into a massive single flock of humanity encircling a single point.
It's a profound shift in identity.
Yeah.
You go from navigating highly individualized laws in your hometown to becoming just one drop in a massive ocean of pilgrims.
Right. So the question that lingers for me is, how does participating in that massive unified physical flock fundamentally alter a person's individual identity once they return home?
Oh, that's a great question.
When the pilgrimage is over and they go back to living under those complex, daily, individualized laws, does the visceral, sweaty, overwhelming physical journey of the body forever change how their analytical mind reads the text?
That's the real crux of it. Does experiencing the fluid, unified movement of the flock change how you view the rigid boundaries of the law?
Exactly.
Once you've felt that primal thirst quenched, does the source code of the law read differently to you?
It's a fascinating tension to consider, and probably one that every person who undertakes the journey has to resolve for themselves. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the intricate architecture of the law and the primal instinct of the pilgrimage. We'll leave you to think on that tension between the mind and the body, and we'll catch you next time.